for the Big Read in Salinas. So it's been a great experience for all of us to read this book together in the community, and I hope some of you have enjoyed the other events that we've had. I have also discussed the book in the course I was teaching and looked at some of the web material today, which I urge you to do. They're very powerful. And this is a book, Citizen, that is it's poetry, it's prose, it's images, and it directs you to a website that is a compilation between a poet and a videographer. So it's really a hybrid text. It embraces so many genres. And I think it's interesting in that way. It's also interesting that Citizen is, on the one hand, very accessible, very easy to read when you read about the microaggressions, which are short paragraphs. And on the other hand, it's difficult because it's a very personal reflection on your own life and poetry. So some of it is more puzzling, but as it should be, because the subject is difficult. You know, race in America and a reflection on race in America is a subject that's challenging for all of us, and I think it's not simple, nor should it be. The book should reflect the subject, and I think this does. So if you don't have copies of Citizen, anybody not read it or not have a copy, then we will give away copies to you so that you have it. We've tried to use a lot of the grant to buy books, so I just love giving books out. So it's my greatest pleasure. As I'm an English professor too, and I love giving out free books. So today we're going to start. Jan Adkins has written a book which is back there about African Americans in Monterey County. She wrote another book about African Americans in San Francisco. And she wrote her master's thesis, I'm going backwards here, on African American newspapers in San Francisco at San Jose State. She was my graduate student at one point, and we had many meetings about the book. But I was teaching California literature, and she said at the anthology we were using, why aren't there more African American voices in this anthology? She asked Al Smith the same question. And he said, well, you should work on that. So that's what she's dedicated herself to for the last, 10 years? Yes. Yes. So I'd like to welcome Jan Adkins to Salinas.
Well, I really want to say thank you to all of you who came out to hear me present my presentation on this book, African Americans of Monterey County. I honestly believe that documenting the local communities, particularly the ethnic communities or communities with a particular kind of cultural nuance, it's so important to document these communities. Our history books that our children are reading every day, some of our literature books do not reflect the community, the makeup of the communities in which our children live. I'm an educator, and so I've been teaching elementary school, high school, now college ever since the 1990s. And that was always the biggest problem, is that students would ask me, well, what about our work? What about me? What about, do you have anything else that we can read? I'm like, no, this is important. You have to read this. And finally, I told my students, I said, you know what? You need to go out. You need to do some research. You need to find it. And they're looking at me like, hey, you're the teacher. What are you going to present? So after doing my own research, I finally decided that it was time for someone to write a book about the African American community, because the African American community is not well documented in California. And so I started this journey with my students in mind, and I wanted a book that was easily accessible to both students as well as family members. I know that family members, many of you are so busy. You really want to connect with a book. You want to look at photographs. You want to read something about the photograph. You want to understand the content. And so I found that the Arcadia books were just the best way of communicating a local history to readers. And so my book has over 200 photographs, and it has, and this particular book I was able in my research to find out that there were people of African descent came to California as early as the 1700s. And I'm like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? And so that began my journey. I was trying to find out how African Americans migrated to California, and what were the patterns, and why. And then what happened? Where did they go? Where did they live? How did they live? So that's what this book is all about. And we'll find out a little bit about the African American, the development of the community from the first black person buried in Alta California in 1770s. His name was Alejo Nino. And I was really surprised to find out about him. The actual cross is a monument to his life. And apparently, Father Juniper Serra, this is where he gave his last mass, or not his last mass, but he gave a mass at this particular place. And then he also, this mass was the ceremony for Alejo Nino. He was a caulker on the Spanish ship. He was a Spaniard, an African Spaniard. And there were many African Spaniards that actually came across to the New World with some of the explorers. And so those who came to Alta California came here which was Mexican territory, came here as workers. And so they worked on the ships, they helped to build the missions, they did a variety of things. And some of the other communities, particularly Santa Clara County, they actually were some of the first families to live in the Pueblo. So that was really, I find that very interesting. So, So I'm just going to sort of go through the book and talk about some of the key people in the book that I've researched, and I will read from various places. So the next person, this is a really interesting story. This person, his name was Alan Light. So Alan Light was nicknamed the Black Steward by his partner in the otter hunting business in Alta California in the 1830s. In 1827, Light was given sailor protection papers, otherwise known as Freeman papers. So here's a copy of the Freeman paper from the court in Boston. He was required to carry the papers at all times. This was to protect him so he wouldn't get captured and put back into slavery. In 1839, Alan Light became a citizen of Mexico, and the same year, Governor Juan Bautista Alvarado hired Light as a principal arbiter of the National Armada for otter fishing. Light's job was to protect the otter throughout the coastline of Monterey County. After 1839, he moved to San Diego County, and he was just a worker in San Diego County. But he lived in a house. He buried his papers in the wall of the house. In 1947, the house was torn down, and his papers were found in the wall of the house. And the papers today, the original papers, are housed at the San Diego Historical Society. So in my research, as I read about Alan Light in Monterey County, my next question, okay, well, where did he go? What happened to him? What happened to him by the 1840s? Where did he go? Well, as I learned, he traveled down throughout California looking for work, doing other kinds of work. He didn't go back to Mexico. He stayed in California, and he ended up in San Diego. Pio Pico. Who would ever think that California had a governor of African descent? Well, there were two, as a matter of fact. The first governor was Lieutenant Colonel Manuel Victoria. And these were people who were of African, Spanish, Indian descent, and they were called Afro-Mezzo. And that was a term that was given to a person who was clearly of African descent. Well, so there were two governors. Pio Pico was the second governor, and in 1845, Pio Pico was appointed governor of the California territory. And so this is him with his wife. After the war, he decided to stay in California, the Spanish-American War. He decided to stay in California, and he moved to Southern California, to Los Angeles. And Pico Boulevard, you guys know Pico Boulevard, that was named after Pio Pico. And he died in 1894 in Los Angeles. And there is a monument established in the historic park in Whittier, California today. And that's where he is honored. So that's Pio Pico. Migration to Monterey County didn't just begin in the 1850s, as I said earlier. It started a little earlier. But it's really interesting to kind of understand the statistics. Well, first of all, Monterey County included parts of San Benito County. And so what we consider San Benito County today, part of that up until about 1860, 1870 was in fact Monterey County. So the state's population, black population grew by the 1850s to 4,000 throughout the state of California. You have to understand that, it wasn't 1850s, it was by 1856, after the 1850s. But this was primarily because of the gold rush. So we know that that's what primarily drew many people to California, many people of African descent. After the Civil War, all of the Africans, people of African descent were no longer enslaved, okay? We know that. However, Phil Reeder, who was a historian from Santa Cruz County, documented that there was one person, a laborer, by the name of Louis Barton, who was still enslaved 10 years after emancipation. And Louis Barton lived in Santa Cruz Mountains, and then, he didn't understand what had happened, but when he was emancipated, he stayed in the Monterey. He moved into the Monterey County from Santa Cruz Mountains, and had to start a farm and and started his family, and he settled here. I love the James Anthony story because James Anthony was a free man who settled in Monterey in the 1850s. He established a family home and ferry crossing business on the Salinas River. I'm going to read this little caption about him. And this was during the California Gold Rush. James came to Monterey with his wife, Mary Hill of Virginia, his newborn son, and his father, George. The family settled near the town on old El Tuco land, and James Anthony eventually took over the ferry service at the El Tuco crossing. By transporting people and goods across the river, he was able to earn money to buy a home. In September 1852, outlaws crossed the Salinas River and robbed a town resident, Aguapito. The sheriff, Henry Cox, organized the posse that included James Anthony. It is believed that Anthony killed the leader of the bandits. Then 2 years following the shootout, a party of 7 men arrived at Anthony's crossing and killed his wife, child, father, and two men who stayed in the inn. So he owned a house and an inn at the crossing, and he was very prosperous. But he decided to help capture the bandits. He lost his family. He eventually moved up to the San Francisco area. And I think this is important because it really shows that those of African descent who lived in California also gave their life, their land, their property in support of, for California. They were very supportive, and he was a person who was not too selfish. He wanted to do the right thing. Unfortunately, it cost him quite a bit. Ishmael Bill Williams. I mean, I can just go on and on. It was just so amazing when I did the research. But I love reading the stories about these people, men and women, who came to California. Bill Williams was born a slave in Georgia. After the Civil War, he came to San Juan, California in Monterey County. He was disabled at birth, but he had tremendous strength. In the 1860s, he was a successful teamster transporting a 76-pound flask in a horse-drawn wagon up the new Hydra Mercury mine trail. So this is a replication. This is not his actual team of horses, flask. But he would drive him up the trails, very steep trails, and he was very highly respected. He died later. He lived to 92. So here are some of the the mine and some of the trails. He had to drive the ore. And he lived until 92. There he is in Hollister. And he's sort of like a Hollister hero. When I visited the museums in Hollister, the Historical Society, I mean, they celebrate Bill Williams because he was a person who dedicated his life to Hollister, to San Benito County, which is now San Benito County. But during that time, it was of course Monterey County. And he was a very hard worker, and there are many stories. Many stories. I mean, there are campfire stories, sitting around the campfire, telling stories to the children, telling stories to the miners, and all kinds of things. He was a real interesting character. But in my book, I write more about him. You can find out a little bit more. But he was a real important person. Here is Main Street in Salinas, and it's hard to see, but the people standing at this end are of African descent. So you kind of wonder, well, were there very many African Americans in the 1990s in Salinas? Yes. Yes, there were several. So here's Alex Cooper. And Alex Cooper was born in 1875. He was born in Watsonville. He moved to Salinas in the 1870s. I'm sorry, in the 1890s. He and other members of his family moved to Salinas with his wife, Sarah. This is just a picture of him as a child when he lived in Watsonville. Here he is again in the 1890s with a friend. And during this time, by the 1890s, between the 1890s and 1894, between 1990 and 1940, there were over 435 people of African descent living in the Monterey County area. Back in the early 1900s, initially 84 African Americans, so it went from 84 to 400. And so the Cooper family was one of the earliest families. Here's Alex Cooper again. When he, after moving here, moving his family, he worked at the sugar plant, Speckles Sugar Company, and he worked there for just a few years, and then decided he wanted his own business. And so he started his own business, a shoe shine business, in front of the Abbott House. And so his family lived here. This is the Speckles Sugar Company where he worked. And this is his wife, Sarah, and he had two boys, Ignatius and Leonard. Here's a photograph of Ignatius playing at his home on Maple Street. And there's Leonard. Leonard was a renowned artist, painter. In the Herald newspaper, it was stated that this is in 1999. He was described as the best-known African-American artist to come out of Monterey County. And this was in an article published by the Herald. And Ignatius Cooper, Ignatius Cooper was a friend of John Steinbeck. And so this was in an article, let's see here. Reporter Alton Pryor mentioned that, here it is. In the Salinas, California, of April 2nd, 1977, all Parsons reported that John Steinbeck wrote fond memories about the Cooper family, and later in life disagreed with common prejudiced ideas that Negroes were an inferior race. Steinbeck stated, "I thought the authority was misinformed. The Cooper house was located behind John Steinbeck's house, and the boys played ball together in the backyard." So that's a picture of Ignatius. This is the house on Maple Street. Later in life, after Ignatius went to war, Ignatius moved back to Maple Street. And it's really sad, but the neighbors did not want him to live there. And the neighbors asked him not to move into the house because they did not want African Americans living on the block. So after a time, he moved back in the house, but he was very sad. He was saddened by the way he was treated. When told by reporter Alan Pryor, being mentioned in John Steinbeck's book, Cooper replied, "He gives me too many credits." Cooper was described by Steinbeck as a good student. But he was also at that point, by later on in life, after serving in the war and wanting to had a wife and everything, wanted to come back and settle in the community in the house on Maple Street. He was very saddened by the way. There are other people like Jesse Stahl, who was a rodeo rider who came to Salinas to ride in the Salinas rodeos. And Jesse Stahl is known for the suicide ride. So what happened is that he placed second, and he couldn't place first in the rodeo competitions. So he was so angry, so he jumped on the back of his horse called Glass Eyes while facing backwards. He rode his horse on what is known as the suicide ride. And it was amazing when I was doing the research in Salinas. I went to the rodeo, as I was corrected, rodeo museum. It told me, no, we call it the rodeo museum. And we have a famous person, Jesse Stahl. I said, oh my gosh. So anyway, I was really proud to see that Salinas welcomed and honored Jesse Stahl. So, there was another famous person of African descent, African American, who also lived for a short period of time in the Monterey area, which is Carmel by the Sea. And I ran across this when I was reading a book written by Langston Hughes called I Wonder as I Wander. And in the book he writes about why he came to Carmel. And he said I wanted very much a chance to be quiet and write. Carmel would give me this chance. So according to Hughes, he lived for a few years rent-free in a cottage in Carmel by the Sea. And the cottage was owned by Noel Sullivan. And he enjoyed it. He wrote, after a brief visit to San Francisco, I settled down at Carmel by the Sea that fall and began to work. Carmel, during the years of the Depression, was known as a place visited by artists and writers. Langston Hughes also states, while in Carmel, there were only 3 colored families and a few others in nearby Monterey. Hughes recalls eating at the home of the cook Willa White Black. Hughes also states in his book that Carmel was a prejudice-free place until Fort Ord and then the war was over. And he claims that many Southerners came and spread racial problems. Well, that was his opinion. It was believed, I did interview a family whose grandmother was a good friend of Langston Hughes. And she talked about how Langston Hughes would often go to the family home and have dinner with them. So anyway, I thought that was really interesting. So many of my book, much of the research also came from oral history too. So families had a chance to talk about. Of course, I had to look at the evidence, and she had lots of pictures. So anyway, I just thought that was kind of like anecdotal, kind of interesting, the story of her grandmother. So, in the middle of my book, I have sort of a love story with Minnie Davis and Rutherford Walker's story. This story began on the day of the earthquake, the San Francisco earthquake. On April 18, 1906, Minnie Davis and Rutherford Walker traveled on a westbound train that stopped in Salinas, California before going on to its destination in San Francisco. The Southern Pacific Depot in Salinas, seen here, so here's the depot right here. Seen here between 1905 and 1910 is a station stop where on April 18, 1906, all passengers, including Minnie and Rutherford, were told to get off the train. And of course, having never been visited Monterey, she wasn't sure, like, where are we going? What are we doing? This is in Salinas. She had no idea. She was on her way to San Francisco. But they were told to get off the train because of the earthquake. Due to the massive earthquake, it could not continue on to San Francisco as scheduled. Neither one of them knew each other. They didn't know each other at all. But being only 2 African Americans on the train, Rutherford then helped Minnie with her bags, and they introduced. And Minnie was connected with the Methodist community in Pacific Grove. And so she was able to settle in Pacific Grove with the Methodist family. And then Rutherford was able to find work, and that's where their life began. here's a photograph of the devastation, the destruction at the Ford and Sanborn store, which is located at Ford and Sanborn Street. So later, here they are, later on in their life, they had children, and here's the cover of the book. I'm going to read this passage. In 1920, the photograph above, 4 of the 6 Walker boys ride bikes on the streets in Pacific Grove. Shown below, this is Letitia, which is the child of Minnie and Rutherford, and she's right here in this photograph. She is a 2nd grader attending the Pacific Grove Grammar School, Pacific Grove. And I had a chance to become pretty good friends with Marguerite McSween Byrne, who happens to be the granddaughter of Minnie Walker, the daughter of Leticia, who is in this photograph right here. And those are Marguerite's uncles. And the reason I selected that particular photograph as the cover of the book is because Monterey County was a place where families, black families, migrated here. Black people came here to work. They were able to work in the service industries. They were able to work in hotels. They were able to work in other areas at the same time in a climate where the weather was nice, and they were able to live peacefully. And so many came and raised their kids in Monterey. That was a major reason. And the major feel from doing my research was that it was a place for families. Even though it was, yes, there were, housing restrictions and lots of discrimination policies that were established all over the country, this was still a good place. And many black families came here. Many families came here after the war, but many came before the war. So, but that was my feeling, was that it was a family. It was a place where black families could relocate and settle. Black people could migrate and establish their families in Monterey. I like the story of Annabelle Gatlin. I'll just tell you briefly her story. So she came to Monterey as an 8-year-old child, at 8 years old, in the 1900s. So she was sent from an orphanage in 1908. She was born in 1900. She was sent from an orphanage in 1908, from an orphanage in Kansas to Monterey to work for Mrs. Gatlin, and to work for who did laundry for local residents. And she lived here. She was adopted. Later on, her daughter was adopted by George, the Smith family, and later on, that family, Frances, who was adopted by the Smith family, married a local person and had a son. And so we have 3 generations of family members who actually lived in Monterey, and they lived here. They prospered, and it was a good place for them. In this particular family, her husband was in fact in the military. George Smith was a military person, so they were here because of the military. But because they were established and couldn't have children, they were able to give Annabelle Gatlin's child an opportunity for a better life. Agnes Thibault is famous here in Salinas. And this is Agnes Thibault's father. He was the first person to come to Monterey, to Salinas actually. And he came here because he was looking for work. And his name is Joe Prada Jonette. And he played on the Golden Dragons, which was the 1940s Negro League team that actually also played other teams against baseball against other teams here in Salinas. And so Agnes is the daughter. She came to Salinas in 1937. She migrated in 1937 to Salinas by train from Louisiana in search of her father, Joe Prada. So she's looking for her father. When she arrives, she meets her father, but he allows her to live with him. And then she begins to establish her own life. She met a man named Louis Bonnie Thibault, and they got married. And she went to before she married him, in the 1950s, she went to high school, to Salinas High School, right here in the city. And her life was dedicated to service. She received an award from President Clinton for her service to the community, for her many years of volunteerism. And there is Senator Sam Farr. Here she is. She received an award from the NAACP in 2010 for her service. When I interviewed her, I asked her, I said, what is the one award, what is the one thing that you can recall that you are most proud of? She said, I received an award from the Salinas downtown community. And she was so proud of that. She said of all the awards she received, the one that meant the most to her was her service to the community of Salinas. Agnes Thibault, I interviewed her, and this is what she told me. 6 months later, she died. She died right before her 100th birthday. She didn't want to live to be 100 years old, according to her daughter. She said no. She told him, no, I don't. She lived her life. She lived a good life. And so people like this, I felt like these are the kind of people you honor. And so that's why, so some of the, in terms of the contemporary people, I identified people who provided service to the community and were highly respected by other people in the community. And those were the people that I felt needed recognition in the book too, in terms of contemporary people. Going back in the past just a little bit, I wanted to include this photograph because it so happens that there's a family, the Wellington family, Wellington Smith family, that actually settled in the Monterey community in the early 1900s. Today, the family is no longer here in Monterey. They've moved to Sacramento and other communities, but the father is buried at the Monterey cemetery. So, okay, well, a lot of people are buried in the cemetery. What's important about that? Well, what's important is that his sons, William Smith and Louis Smith, owned the first taxi service business in Monterey from 1910 to 1928. And so it's so interesting because I saw the business card, the taxi cab business card. I'm like, really? And they made a little business card, and this was something that they made to promote their business, and they were so proud of the business. They owned a house. They owned a house that was on 1200 Prescott Street in Monterey, the Wellington family, and 2 generations of the families lived in this house. And the house is still there. It's sold to someone else and went on. The kids went to school here in Monterey. One of the Wellington members of the family was a very well-respected person in the juvenile justice system. And he's received many awards and honors, and you'll see he's written about it in the book too. And so this is a family that served Monterey and served the communities for generations. And what I thought was so wonderful was that everyone's moved away, but they still come back. It was so interesting in my research, I had a chance to meet one of the family members, Wellington III, and he said, yeah, we still come back every few years to have a family reunion right here in Monterey. And there are still a few members of their family. So in the book, this book is about 5 chapters. One chapter is on the African American church, and I then devote a chapter to the war heroes. Can't write about African Americans in Monterey without recognizing the Tuskegee Airmen and some of the Buffalo Soldiers and others who were in the military who moved to this community. So Tuskegee Airmen came here. So here's William Bill Campbell. He was of the 99th Fighter Squadron, and he led fighters of the 33rd Fighter Group. Well, what's important about this is that after World War II, the military sent the African American military officers, where? To Fort Ord, to Monterey. And there were a couple of reasons for that. Number one, the military was desegregated. So after segregation, they couldn't send those captains and those officers to other places in the country where it was discrimination, wouldn't allow a black person to command non-blacks, non-blacks, period. It didn't matter what their race was, they couldn't command non-black troops. So they were sent to Fort Ord because this was where the military decided to integrate first. And so many of the captains and many of those who were officers rather, and those who were outstanding in the military were sent to Fort Ord, Monterey. This is at 99th Squadron in Italy, and it's really interesting here because Benjamin Odell, right here, who's the commander of the 99th, is seen there with, and so this person, William Campbell, moved to Monterey. This person moved to Monterey, and there's a story about all of them in the book. But anyway, and there was a second reason why, another reason, is that many African Americans in the war married German or women of non-African descent, German and Asians. And they couldn't send them anyplace else in the country either. So they sent them to Monterey because other states in the country would not allow interracial marriages, but they were able to live in Monterey, and so we had quite a few families. So the family of this particular, I know this person who, and actually the child of George Bank, who this is his parents, he's a teacher up in San Jose, and told me the story of his family and the family home, how they weren't able to buy a house because of restricted covenances, but what they did was bought land and built their house. So they're able to have a home and live in Monterey. In this case, it was the city of Monterey. I end the book with this particular person. Her name is Major General Mary Josephine Green Kite. Her father was a military man. She decided to go in the military. She became a Major General. From 2006 to 2011, Major General Kite served as an adjunct general for the California National Guard and state missions. And so she was the general in charge of the National Guard. And here she is for the state, and this was under Arnold Schwarzenegger. My last photograph in the book are some of the leaders of the black community and their effort to come together and to promote service and to promote the betterment of the community. And in this case, they also wanted to name the street Obama Way. That's good in recognition of our past president. Thank you very much. You have questions? Yes.
Did you do any research of the black community in Seaside? Because they were very...
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Several of the people that I mentioned. So what happened is because of the restricted covenants, many of the black families had to move to Seaside.
Right.
And Seaside was in the county area. So the city didn't care, and it was a dump at one time.
Yeah.
So nobody cared, you know. And so they were able to buy land and build homes, and Seaside became a flourishing city.
Right.
But many, yes. So many of the people in this particular photograph, this is in Seaside, and so many of them actually live in Seaside. And many of the officers who were sent to Fort Ord settled in Monterey. Settled in Seaside and established their homes there. But the restricted covenants is what prohibited black families from living elsewhere.
Yeah, and my parents, my father was from the Philippines, my mother was from Mexico. They were not allowed to marry in California, and that was in 1936. And they had to, you know, so there were laws that prohibited interracial marriage. my mother, being of Mexican descent, was considered white, and it was then declared an interracial marriage, and they had to go to Washington to get married.
Right. That is true in California. That is true. But the laws, I believe, well, what happened is that the interracial families, though, were able to live here.
Yeah, they were able to live here, but they were not allowed to marry.
Yeah. Yeah, as a matter of fact, we have that same case with Ben, the NAACP president, past president. His family lives in Pacific Grove, and his father, here it is, Ben Jealous. His father is white and his mother is black, and they actually had to leave the state where they lived, and they had to leave like late at night, and they drove all the way across the country to California because they knew they could live here. But you're right, many people, and I'm not sure when the law was changed in California, but there was a time when people could not, interracial marriage was not allowed.
They gave a lecture here.
Oh, Jealous?
Uh-huh.
Oh, yes, his mother. Let's see. Ann Jealous, yes, Ann and Fred Jealous. Okay, yes. Oh, she gave a lecture here. Did she talk about the struggle, the problems with the interracial marriage? Yeah. Oh, yeah, her book covers much of that too. Oh, that's wonderful. Yes, I researched it and spent quite a bit of time discussing the problem of the interracial marriage and the problems that they had. So she's also featured in the book too with her family. Yes.
You mentioned the what did you say, the covenant?
Yeah.
Restrictive covenants.
Restrictive.
And those were policies that did not allow African Americans to buy a house in certain neighborhoods.
Oh, I know about that.
So that's what it's called, and those were called housing policies.
And it was all over California?
All over the country.
Oh, yeah.
And it's amazing because many of those policies were as a result of the government. So,
Why
yeah.
would they be called covenants? It's such a strange
I don't
word
know.
for that.
Yeah, I think that someone in real estate probably can explain why it was called, but those are restrictive policies that were placed on the sale of housing, the financing of housing, and many different things. And so those were policies that would not allow people of different ethnic groups to move in different neighborhoods. But we don't have that today, so thank goodness. Fair housing laws were able to get rid of some of the, yes.
I think there are still some covenants that are, as a friend of mine was talking about in Carmel, even though they're ignored, they're still in the books in terms of covenants.
Yeah.
I think that
CCNIs.
they, in other words, I think they go with the house, with the land, with the property. It's on the property, and so you're right.
Yeah.
There are still some properties that
They are.
have that in their instrument, in the mortgage instruments.
Right.
Yeah, so you're shaking your head, you're familiar with that, yeah.
CCNR is something like
Yeah.
conditions,
Yeah.
covenants, and something, I
Yeah.
can't remember.
So it goes with the house, and so this house may have a covenant that says you cannot leave, whatever the restrictions are. And that happened.
Ann Jealous is going to be speaking with her husband at a showing of the movie Loving.
Oh,
At the-
wonderful.
And that's going to be at the Middlebury Institute. Do you know when that's going to be, Wes?
Sometime early November, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And they're going to be at the Middlebury, they're going to show Loving, and then she and her husband are to speak about their experience.
It's got a wonderful story.
I want to see that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
No, thank
So how do
you.
you find the situation in San Jose different from Monterey County?
Oh, big difference. The purpose for migrating, the time period is a little different. The purpose for migrating to Santa Clara County primarily was because of technology jobs. And this is prior to this current technology. We're talking about we're talking about the early years of technology So many of those companies went to traditionally African American schools and colleges and recruited. We also have industry, General Motors going into Milpitas and establishing the General Motors factory, and that brought many people from after the war, from Richmond and some of those communities down into Milpitas, which is adjacent to San Jose. So it was primarily jobs. That was the difference. In Monterey County, the military was a presence that brought many people, and the tourist industry brought many people here, not just of African descent, but of all races came to work in tourism. This was a big reason for many. So every community has a different reason. In my San Francisco book, it was gold rush. It's gold, yeah. And once establishing the community in San Francisco, and they continued to flourish and live. And then the war industry brought lots of jobs, and many people migrated to San Francisco because of the war industry and the jobs in shipbuilding, all of that. And then now we see people have moved out because some of those opportunities aren't there. Well, in San Jose, we have a similar thing, is that there was many jobs in technology, but now many people are moving on to other places. So we have, with the Great Migration, we have many people of African descent, but of other ethnic groups that migrated to San Jose in search of employment, primarily.
How about crops, like workers and the field workers?
Not so much. Not much at all. And there's another interesting story, is that during the Japanese internment, I was told that many African Americans moved into the homes and saved the homes, but I haven't been able to document that either. So that's interesting. I know, I have to.
You heard of that?
I've been told, oh, by the way, my family did this and that, moved into a home of a Japanese person who was interned, and then saved their home for them so that they could move back.
Was that the
Very
African
nice.
American community?
Yes,
that did that?
because
Oh, wow.
individual families. It wasn't
Yeah.
the community as a whole, but individual families. But that's so very difficult to document. So I'm finding a lot of really interesting stories. In every community, there's a different story. There's a different reason for the migration, different reason to stay, a different reason, different stories, different family stories. But primarily, the early community came just for work. And actually, there was in Santa Clara County, there's what is called the Colored School, was established in 1860. And so that was a black school that recruited the kids. Actually, it was a boarding school, and they came as far as Panama to attend the school. So there's a lot of really interesting differences.
There were a lot of fruit trees up in Santa Clara and up that way.
You know what? I have not found evidence of African American families working on. I'm sure there were. Oh, I know there were laborers. I found many people working in agricultural labor, but not necessarily picking agriculture, not the actual, picking up the fruit. So that's an interesting question. But I have been able to establish that many worked on the farm, but whether they were actually picking fruit, I've not been able to document. Yes.
What's your next project?
Well, I'm working on a book, African Americans of Santa Clara County.
Okay, so you have San
So that one,
Francisco,
that one I'm
Salinas.
still in the deep in research. Yeah, very. I was also told that the black mathematicians actually were housed at the base right outside of Mountain View. Yeah, but I haven't been able to prove that. And I've contacted the military about whether there were actual mathematicians, because we know the mathematicians, you had a chance to see the movie Hidden Figures, yes, I understand that, but I can't document that.
We need to contact NASA Ames.
I have contacted NASA Ames, and they've sent me oh, there's no such thing. So, yeah, I actually need to contact families that have evidence of, and that's usually what happens, is that history is not recorded. So you have to contact the families who have photographs and pictures and proof and evidence and copies of hiring papers and whatever. And that was the way the research was done for Hidden Figures, that the writer actually had to contact the families and was able to show proof that there were, in fact, black mathematicians. And why is it that that's not available? Or at least, well, maybe that's because the whole issue of segregation didn't want to show that, you know, the black mathematicians were segregated.
I had another question. I don't mean to monopolize you or anything. I thought about the hidden information in the walls of that house. Did he protect? He did that consciously to protect it? Did he wrap it in plastic? I mean, it was.
Well, I don't know if he wrapped it in plastic or not. I
It
mean,
looks pretty good.
but probably because the Historical Society today, they were so excited to share this information. Guess what? We got the papers here. I said, oh really? You know what happened? Did bugs didn't eat the papers or what happened? So he must have sealed the papers in some way. But remember, he had to hide his papers to keep from losing the papers because that was evidence of his freedom. And then afterwards, he just kept the papers anyway, you know. So exactly. Well, so Alan White, I think he died in. See, I can't recall off the top of my head, but he died. I mean, I don't know. I really don't know how these papers were hidden in the walls until 1940s, 1948. I don't know, but that's the story. And the Historical Society is sticking by it, and these papers have his name on it. If you get a book, you'll see it says Alan White right here. So, yeah, really interesting. And notarized, too. Very cool. Yeah. Thank you very much. We are with the reception, will start in a few minutes. And that we're also going to have a book discussion about Citizen and this big read. So we'll have a short book discussion. So Lisa is the archivist here at the National Steinbeck Center. I'm the director, Susan Schilling-Long, Lisa Josephs. So we are going to just field questions. So I hope some of you have read the book and have some questions or ideas you'd like to discuss. Following that is going to be a performance by Alisal High School students who are going to perform parts of this book. So that will happen, I guess at 6:30. Please stay around, walk around downtown, come back, whatever you want to do. So this is the closing of the big read. This has been, again, quite, just as a by way of introduction, quite a significant book for me personally, because I think there have been moments in talking to the audience where, or seeing the dramatization or reading the book, where you really realize how much we need to, I suppose, walk in one another's shoes, or just realize the reality of somebody else's life in often small ways. I teach at San Jose State, and I teach American literature, and students just gave a presentation on slavery in America, and it's almost as if they place everything in the past, this was terrible, and this happened, and here's Reconstruction, and here's slavery, but it's not in the past, and so it's not this historical subject. These are subjects that also have to be confronted, not slavery, of course, and not Reconstruction per se, but the legacy of all that, and the impact, and what it feels like. And I think this book, what it does, what it accomplishes is a sense of showing readers this is what it feels like. In this microaggressions are just small moments that we tend to overlook and think, oh, that's nothing, or that's not significant, or I'll just,
I'll just not make a big deal about that. But each of them mounts up when you start to create, what is racism. We just saw what happened with, Harvey Weinstein and how women, there's this avalanche now, but each of those incidents, nobody wanted to say it was significant. Like, watch me take a shower. Well, I guess I can overlook that because after all, this is a job and a career and everything else. And so, but to overlook it is to overlook, now it seems impossible when somebody could say, he asked you to watch him take a shower and that wasn't objectionable. So these moments that we don't call attention to and yet they're significant as they pile up, I think is what this book is about. Things happen in our country that create legacies. Anybody want to comment on that in any way?
I know that there's quite an avalanche, and actually it's opening up the other things that we didn't look at, which have to do with pedophilia with children in Hollywood.
Oh yeah,
And
there's lots
a
of,
large group of them are coming forward now because of Harvey Weinstein's.
yeah, I didn't mean to divert, I don't want to talk about Harvey Weinstein because it's
Yeah.
just, it's like such
But
a horrible
secrecy.
subject, we don't want to divert attention to
Yeah,
Harvey
but
Weinstein.
secrecy.
It doesn't even deserve to be discussed at this point. Yes, but I do, yes.
Well, to join what you just had mentioned, I think we're being lulled to sleep right now with this current president that we have. There's so much numbing and dumbing down of how we used to respond to totally inappropriate behavior and leadership and so forth, but we're sleepwalking right now.
Yep.
And if you do the polling, there's still a significant number of people that think this sociopath is doing the right thing. And that's not the United States that I recognize. So we're, maybe 10 years from now when we wake up, we're going to say, what the hell were we thinking? And it's the same thing that you had mentioned with this Hollywood rich guy.
Yeah, right.
That worries me because we're getting so insensitive to bad things that are still happening that it kind of concerns me right now.
Yeah,
I agree.
after the election, the day after the election, you're not supposed to talk politics in class, and I really did try, but I was completely unsuccessful the day after this local election because I was mourning. I really just didn't want to be there, and actually, I got one complaint on the evaluations that I brought politics in class, so you're just like, really? Anyway, but one student said, he represents everything we were told not to do in kindergarten. And I keep thinking of that, don't bully, don't, belittle, don't. And it's true, that's the lessons we learned in kindergarten, and we're,
With what you said about these things happening for a long time with this particular, what's the Weinstein?
yeah.
And very little reaction to it, very little response to it. And then now it seems to be in focus and it's a real issue. And I'm just suggesting that we're going through that same process again. And maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, we'll say, oh my God, what's going on? What happened here? So I agree with your premise on Weinstein.
Yeah. Well, I just think that, I guess being a woman is one of the things that I think, how could you ignore those things? And then you do, because you don't think you should bring it up. Because it doesn't, and I think this book shows us little things that happen, and you think, well, for, somebody says something, the example, affirmative action, and, I had to hire somebody as a creative writer because of affirmative action, and this African American is sitting, the author is sitting next in the car and says, I can't believe you said that, I'm sitting right here. You're talking about affirmative action when I'm here, and are you saying I'm a product of affirmative action, I don't deserve my job, or what is the subtext here? And so little moments like that are, they're not small, they accumulate and they're large.
I'd like to jump in. One of the things that
I've been thinking about through the course of all these discussions is actually the idea of faith, not in God, but in each other. And what I feel is the issue with so many people not speaking up, not saying, is the idea that no one will have faith in me. No one will have faith that I make sense, that my reaction was that I felt that my reaction was logical. No one will have faith that I believe what happened here was problematic. And so, particularly during the showing for Fruitvale Station, the discussion afterwards, if you weren't there, it was difficult, and I know there were definitely some points of friction. And I thought that a lot of it comes down to the need to listen with a certain kind of compassion and a certain lack of numbness, almost the willingness to be hurt, to be vulnerable, to be hurt by other people's experiences and to feel that pain. And that's what I really felt was so important about this book, is because all those little moments one by one going on and on and on, it maybe helps a person build a faith in what Claudia is saying and what Marikina is trying to get across, because they're all now in one moment. So it's not just, one friend complains on one occasion of something that seems small that I can trivialize. It's all of these trivial moments brought together and showing that the connection between them. And so I hope that what some people have gotten out of this is maybe a little willingness to listen, and like I said, to be uncomfortable. That's the one great thing about the text, and what I thought, what Eric had said in particular, is by putting it all in the second person, she forces the reader to sit where she was. She forces you to be part of what she's experienced, and hopefully through that authorial direction of your attitude and your thoughts, that you can understand where she's coming from and very much be in her shoes for a little while. And hopefully that can carry on into a sense of faith in other people, that they make sense to themselves, and that when they say something similar, there's something that you can reflect back with. So that was very interesting.
I was there at the Fruitvale Station,
Yeah.
and I was really impressed with Stephen, the moderators, with his ability to field the questions and to not let one sensibility or one viewpoint dominate, but giving everybody a chance. But also, I was amazed that that through the way he was able to moderate so well when there were starting to get emotions that were going, that it came down to the person who was really upset, their own personal experience, and then other people started, this is something I can relate to, and they shared. I thought he did a really good job.
Yeah, I was particularly impressed with him too. I so much appreciate what he did for us. So
The movie was really good too.
yeah, it was.
Well said.
Did anybody else have any responses to the book, or something that you want to say about the book, or reading it? I mean, I am an English professor, so I want to keep coming back to the book. And whether anybody, like in reading the words, had any response, or a particular passage that.
Well, I think to me that it was the passage about the imagination, something about until you change the people's imagination, in terms of receiving. And I have it marked in my book, and I don't have it. But when people react, the police, they're not reacting to what the reality is, that what the scenario is in their head, that this person is going to be a bad person, especially a person of color. And I just thought that, I wish I could pull it up, it was a real powerful statement for me. When he was talking about we're being numbed, or I almost feel that we're being manipulated right now. When we talk about the football players who are falling on one knee, it was kind of interesting when I first heard about it. My background is Catholic, so for me to have somebody fall on their knees was an act of being humble, you know, that Christ broke his body for you. And so when I saw this person falling on their knee, to me they were humbling themselves before the, you know, before the flag. It had nothing to do with them being disrespectful. And when I started hearing all these other things, I go, oh my gosh, this is so completely different from my point of view, from my experience when I saw this. And where, you know, my question is, where are we going? And we have these two very strong polarizing viewpoints of what this means. And it's like that, you know, she says, you know, our imagination, our perception takes us in a whole different direction. And how do we find that common bond of humanity, you know?
That's a really good point, you know, the imagination.
Yeah.
And, you know, at San Jose State, we have a lot of public art around campus. And one of them is Tommy Smith that went to San Jose State. But not just a small Tommy Smith, but I don't know, he's 18 feet high. And he's in the middle of it's right by the president's, you know, office. So defiantly, with his hand up, and, you know, and so we pass it every day, so I'm used to it. It's celebrating their stance of you know, protesting at the 1972 Olympics. And then to have the same situation happen today, and the criticism, just, it's jarring to me to have this statue sort of honoring the moment and the courage of that moment, and then we're starting all over again, and as if we're just cycling backwards. And so it's, I don't know, to me it's...
I found the quote and said, because white men can't police their imagination, black people are dying.
Okay.
You know, that's on page 135. And to me, that was such a powerful statement.
And especially after the list of names,
Right.
and the names kind of start fading out, so you don't even know what
Right.
names will come next.
Right.
So sometimes the graphics in this book are
No,
very
When I got to this,
Well, I haven't had a chance to read it. That's about the fruit mill incident?
This book,
Yes.
no,
this is the big read text of Citizen, and so it's a reflection on, it's called an American lyric, and the title is Citizen, which is really interesting. So it's about race in America, but it's the fact that it's a lyric, and that the title is Citizen, and that it has a hoodie on the front, says a lot, just in the cover. So it's about, but we showed films as part of the series for the big read, and one of the films is Fruitvale Station. Probably the most controversial film is Fruitvale Station.
And it's available on Netflix.
Yeah.
Netflix, and then Amazon.
Yeah.
That's where we got the DVD, so.
I'm sorry, what?
Well, regarding the Fruitvale Station, I just off an opinion on that. I'm a retired law enforcement. And I retired as the assistant chief of police for San Jose. And so I do have some understanding of the police officers' mentality. But what the general public doesn't know is that no matter how big the police officer may be, mesomorphic, he may appear to be, and type A, and high testosterone, and all of that sort of stuff, that same person can be very fearful. And I've seen that before. I've been introduced to it. And that event at that station, at that BART station, had to do with a very large man, 6'4", being frightened out of his mind. And when he thought he was really about to lose it, he made a mistake. And of course, he paid for it righteously. But people don't understand that not everybody is suitable for that particular job, because you don't know where they're...
You're talking about the policeman who was large,
Yes,
or
the police officer who shot, who hit it,
So he was very large.
Messerly is his name.
Oh,
yeah.
Mesri.
Yeah, he was very tall.
I think in the movie they did show this person be very physically, obviously
Well,
active.
the same person can also be fearful
Yep.
or somewhat angry, and that's where the movies come in.
To follow up on that, if I may, being a white guy, I was at, let's see, the 7-Eleven on Sanborn and Market by the pilot.
Right.
But somebody had turned out to be a BB gun, but it was like a 9mm, black, didn't have a red tip, anything like that, and they were waving around, and so I just disarmed them. They were just some silly person, and I put it in my leather jacket, walked in, and suddenly I'm surrounded by 10 police officers with their guns drawn, and I'm like, and they're like, hey, you match the description. I mean, well, they were like, match the description, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay. And so I said, reach, but I kept smiling and kept talking, reached behind here, checked my ID, mentioned Chief Frise and Deputy Chief Shaw, my district. I mean, I was like, don't shoot me in the head. Because I realized that, I bet somebody had seen that and thought something wrong. People around me, they were like, oh, okay, well, that's Greg, because I go to city council meetings, this gentleman sees, hi, how you doing? What if I wasn't white? What if I didn't have those names to throw down? What if I couldn't smile and talk fast? What if I wasn't with this young lady in a leather jacket and a bikini? It was just weird, and they didn't even search me, but then some Hispanic people were like, well, hey, well, dude, how'd you do that? And I'm like, I don't know. And I still need to write up or send an email to Chief Frise, because I do occasionally talk to them at meetings, but to say, number one, I was not being glib, because one of the officers said I was being glib. G-L-I-B, glib. I was trying to that's the way you save your life. And I would just wonder, as did everybody that was sitting around, what would happen if I had not been white and a fast talker and known how to, like turn around and do the right movements? What if I was on drugs or had, and since you have a police background.
What is your name, Greg?
I'm Greg.
Yeah. Walter.
Walter.
But if you'd have been looking like me, or maybe this gentleman standing up over here, and not being glib, out of the 5 cops that were there with you on that situation,
10.
well, let's go with 10.
No, seriously.
1 or 2 of them would have been petrified in that situation, thinking that they're in imminent danger and they don't have control of their judgment when they get fearful like that.
Right.
And the majority of them would have been okay. But that's the problem. We got scared and angry folks that should not be in that job.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
And they, I understand from the police perspective, because I have friends that look just like this man that are from Jamaica. They served in the Jamaican Coast Guard, and they were married to white women, and they talk about racism, and I'm like, yeah. But then now I know. I've been hanging around for a few years. I see it. It's not just something that's theoretical to me. I see it in the brutality to that what the way my friend is treated, and he's got a Jamaican flag on his dashboard. But it's the and I do understand from a police perspective. I want those guys to go home every night safe to their families. I do. And when something bad happens, because even though I'm wearing a $1,000 suit, I'm homeless. Tonight, I'm changing out of this, and I'm gonna be sleeping under a bush. I'm gonna be storing this at a church, and I'll be looking different, and the cops treat me different. But I do want to respect them.
Well, it certainly doesn't help when our president says on television that when you make an arrest on people, you don't worry about being careful with them or treating them fairly.
Oh, it was encouraging, right?
If they get injured, that's a good thing.
Yes.
That's what's going on crazy in our country. Right?
Did you read 2 days ago, Washington Post, the transcript of him with Mitch McConnell? It's going down in history, if you read the transcript of his word-by-word stuff, it is disgusting. By any human being. And I'm sorry, I used to be a Republican for about 2 minutes. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I have a question. The ones who are scared, like the officer at Fruitvale Station, you say he was big but scared. So how do you do psychological profiles? I have a stepson who wants to be a policeman and had an unfortunate incident in college, which I guess will forever prevent him from being a policeman. But I think he'd be good if he were accepted. But I don't know if drugs in college at the stupid age of 17 or 18 should keep you from forever being on the police force when there are other people who might have other more serious psychological issues that are, I don't know.
I'll try to do this in 30 seconds. So not every agency is as careful in the selection process, but minimally, most of them go through some psychological screening, but it's to determine if there's pathology there, to determine if we have a crazy or someone who's emotionally unstable to begin with. But still within that group of people that you make a decision to hire, there's going to be some that they get proper training. Part of training is teaching them to be cautious and to have sort of a sixth sense and to sense danger and so forth. But some of them can interpret that as everybody's dangerous. And they succumb to the subculture within the police organization. That you better watch out because you never know when somebody's going to step out with a machine gun and so forth. And so if you couple that with a person who has is easily intimidated or afraid, especially with regard to other races, that's when you have these questionable shootings happen. And in some cases, those questionable shootings happen because I'm pissed at you and I'm going to kill you. Try to get away with it. So there's error that occurs. These cameras are catching it all on these cell phones, and there's evidence that there's improvement on the way. But when the President of the United States does what he did, that doesn't happen.
I wondered if I could ask you a question. The incident that kind of rocked my boat and was caught on camera here in Salinas was of the elderly man who was thought to be a peeping Tom, and he had clippers, and he was very intimidated by the fact that police had been called and they were surrounding him, and he just had clippers, and I understand more and more, but that situation, because he was quite elderly and he was very afraid. He was looking around like this, and there must have been, gosh, at least 15 policemen. And if you kind of let it go in slow motion, you're looking at, there were more than just a few of them. They had a taser, they had a gun, they had an armored car, basically their own car that they could go to. They could get away. They had a rifle in their car, they had a radio, all those things. And this little man just had clippers and they shot him dead. And the thing is it's gotta inform us that our police are afraid. It's got to, because they're not all afraid, or they're not weenies. I'm not saying that they're not stand-up people, but there's the dynamic of people see crime and they don't call their police. They're suspicious of their police,
Again, I didn't want to take the issue here. I just responded to the Fruitvale incident that's in there. Agencies vary. It has a lot to do with whether or not there's a sensitive community that will tolerate those kinds of mistakes. And Ferguson, Missouri is an example where the community had no connection to law enforcement or general local politics whatsoever. And so you had a whole bunch of aspects happening. So I didn't want to take away from this book. I'm anxious to read it now.
No, the book's not about Fruitvale, although it's about violence and know, it doesn't specifically talk about rehabilitation, that's just one of the films that we showed. But we did want police representatives at the discussion afterwards, but that didn't happen. So I was kind of sad. Other communities are reading this book. Denver is reading this book. Los Angeles is reading this book. And the Denver Police Department and the Los Angeles Police Department kind of paid to have her come and talk, conduct a community
Request anybody
discussion.
from Salinas to come to join us? Did you request someone from Salinas? And they did not come.
They don't show up.
ACLU was there.
Yeah,
Police,
she was very good. We had other people there, but, I just think it's a dialogue that's difficult. It's not comfortable, but.
The chief should take an opportunity to come to something like this. Not just some police officer, but the chief should be out here.
Yeah.
They had a gathering over at Sherwood Hall a week after that, and I thought it was, they said, they touted it as a town meeting, and I missed a really good talk here about policing the imagination, and I thought that was going to be a town meeting involving police in this discussion that we didn't have at Fruitvale, and it was about voting on what the new police station was going to look like.
Yes.
It was a great discussion to have, and it did include the community, and there were some good things, but the chief of police walked up to me and shook my hand, and I said, I'm glad to meet you, and she said, well, it's just not very many people here. And I says, well, I don't know what to tell you, but I thought this was going to be a town hall. And she kind of backed away from that. She did not want to engage my bringing that up.
There's I've been to he's probably been there filming, but are you putting
Possibly, go ahead.
I've been to a couple what is it, police community
Advisory committee?
advisory committee, a couple of those meetings, and not one officer. Well, there was a cadet at one. So I kind of like, I went up to the mic, but I actually said I commended some officers that I'd seen slide into my front yard and chase a guy over a fence that had stolen a car. The guy was much younger, they didn't catch him, but high-fived the officers, and then I grilled them about what they wanted to do with the budget, and they're like, way over my pay grade. So I brought that up, and later I talked to Chief Frise offline and just gave her a hard time. There was a little shift. I think she's got a lot more confidence in the past about 4 weeks. There was some internal politics. Now she's got the former chief, who's now hired on as a consultant assistant chief. Do you know about that? Okay, so she's got more. She's got more oomph in her step now. I don't know if that's going to change things in terms of interface with the public. But she's definitely got more pep, and that's better than having this because if you feel like you're on the defensive, you don't want to engage. She's ready to engage. I think it's a good right time to talk to her. She's very intelligent. She's an ex-Marine. She can back me into a corner pretty good with just a couple words in a nice way, So I think we just need to keep it up.
Well,
with respect,
another book, another time. So, well, thank you. I want you to talk to Jan back there with her books, so, and have some lemonade and cookies and cheese and continue the discussion. So I know a lot of you have been sitting here for an hour and a half, so I don't want to have to give you a break, but thank you all for coming, and thank you for the insights. I mean, that's helpful. So.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good evening, excuse me. Sorry for the delay. It's a technical thing.
You're welcome.
Tonight is an experiment. We gave graduate study work to a group of 5 high school actors. So let's see how they did. But I'm sure it was a growing experience for them. They knew racism. They knew that. They weren't so familiar with Katrina and Trevor Martin. And now they are. So that, any artistic endeavor where everybody is learning and getting to work with each other, that is success. Tonight's work, Citizen, which kind of closes off this really fine presentation of Claudia Rankine's book to the Salinas community. I think it was very successful. I think we all got into movies, theater, discussions, reading, and then reading something with a lot of depth, as I'm sure all of us. I'd like to just give one quote, and from Claudia, and I thought it meant something to me. But before we begin here, she said, "The challenge of making racism." Excuse me, it wasn't her, it was New York Times talking about her book. "The challenge of making racism relevant or even evident to those who do not bear the brunt of its ill effects is tricky." Rankine brilliantly pushes poetry's forms to disarm readers and circumvent our carefully constructed defense mechanisms against the hint of possibly being racist ourselves. I'd like to introduce the director of tonight's performance, Ms. Veronica Pulido from Alice Hall High School.
Good evening. Thank you for being here. You could have been anywhere else today and you decided to be with us today, so I appreciate that. I don't have anything prepared, so I'll say something from the top of my head, as I always end up doing. It was a pleasure to have this project being presented to me. This is something new. I decided to add a little bit of reading with a little bit of audio, visual, and mix in the theatrical sense of theatrics and justice, political justice, which I think is a topic that is very relevant today and we see it everywhere. I'd like to thank my students. So before they start, can I give them a round of applause? For a lot of them, these are students who have never even been part of any theater at all. So it is a first for them, but I am proud to say that I've seen them grow in the past month and a half, and I feel very proud of them. And I hope that they are able to pass on the message that they so deeply have talked about. We've had conversations that I haven't had conversations with anyone else, any of my students, because of this work. And so I think that this work has spoken many, many volumes. So without further ado, I'd like to bring forward Alice High and the collaboration of Everett Alvarez, Citizen. Citizen, an American lyric.
By Claudia Rankine. Excerpt adapted for the stage by Michael Roddy. Rising Tide.
We've been drowning here for a long time, but it took a while for people to notice. There was no murky waters or unrelenting waves. It was a silent slaughter renamed discrimination. An aging and unchanging, brutal from its creation, like a wolf in sheepskin, cackling as we reached to pet it. Swallowing up my brothers and sisters until our tears became crashing waves of terror. The first wave was poverty. The lowest of the low, lost in the search for stability. It was the claws, the fine print dealings and the eviction notices, the bloodied hands that took and became wealthy off of the sweet scent of suffering. We've been drowning here for a long time. Even before the colored boys and girls lying limp on the streets, before we could vote, crushed when we tried to sing, our knees familiar with rocky concrete and feet used to marching. We've been drowning, completely invisible and silence a part of our culture. But people only heard us when it came. Only started to see when the sea reached the headlines. Did it come as a bullet held by a scared man or a teenage boy that walked past the wrong house and was too dark to see during the storming night? No, it came as a hurricane. The way many things do, a natural catastrophe, one that people could not control, but seemed to care more about fixing. A storm known for creating underground cities with no living residents, people known only for staying, not leaving. Taking mothers and fathers, it took my brother, he's gone. I couldn't hold on, his fingers too slick and too small. Help me, God, help us. We've been drowning here for a long time, and even after the hurricane ceased to an end, the water drained back to the sea, and the deserted bodies collected and passed back like exam papers, scores determining whether poor survivors had better sob stories. It's more interesting to hear about a family that had everything and was left with nothing than a family that had nothing even before the hurricane came. We are still drowning, our homes still gone, our loved ones ripped from fragile arms by swirling pools of destruction, watching organizations rebuild free homes for those who could pay to restart, and not the poor left to float through the current. That's the thing. Another disaster hits and people forget, frequently using #save, but not remembering the ending. Pushed to the back of the mind, collecting dust, forgetting that there are people still resettling, hosting funerals for empty caskets, waiting for better times while they accept excuses. The last lifeboat couldn't fit us all inside, they said. They would come back for us, they said, lying through razor-sharp teeth as we watched them pack in more people from the upper state neighborhoods, leaving us on another roof as the water rises.
When you are alone and too tired to even turn on any of your devices, you let yourself linger in the past, stacked among your pillows. Usually you are nestled under blankets and the house is empty. Sometimes the moon is missing and beyond the low gray ceiling seems approachable. It's dark, light dims in degrees depending on density of clouds. And you fall back into that which gets reconstructed as metaphor. The route is associative. You smell good. You are 12, attending St. Philip and James School on White Plains Road, and the girl sitting behind you asks,
You know, could you lean to the right when you have exams so I can copy what you have written?
well, okay.
You smell good, and your features are more like a white person.
You assume she thinks she is thanking you for letting her cheat and feels better cheating from an almost white person.
You are in the dark, in the car, watching a black tar street being swallowed up by steam, he tells us.
I can't believe it. My dean is making me hire a person of color when there are so many great writers out there.
You think maybe this is an experiment, and you are being tested or retroactively insulted, or you have done something that communicates this is an okay conversation to be having. As usual, you drive straight through the moment with the expected backing off of what was previously said. It is not that confrontation is headache producing, but it's also that you have a destination that doesn't include acting like this moment isn't inhabitable, hasn't happened before, and the before isn't part of now. When you arrive in your car, when you arrive in the driveway and turn off the car, you remain behind the wheel. A friend once told me.
There exists a medical term, John Henryism, for people exposed to the stresses stemming from racism. They achieve themselves to the death trying to dodge the buildup of erasure. Sherman James, the researcher who came up with the term, claimed the physiological costs were high.
You hope by sitting there in silence, you are bucking the trend.
Well, fine. I'll just drop by and sign that form a little later today. Hi there. I just called you about an hour ago about signing that form.
My, I didn't know you were black. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that.
Aloud?
What?
You didn't mean to say that aloud. I've got to get going now. Where do I sign?
I didn't know that black women could get cancer. Being around black people is like watching a foreign film without translation. Not long ago in a room where someone asked the philosopher Judith Butler what makes language hurtful.
Our very being exposes us to the address of another. We suffer from the condition of being addressable. Our emotional openness is carried by our addressability. Language navigates this.
For so long, you thought the ambition of racist language as to degenerate and erase you as a person. Now, you understand yourself as hypervisible. Language that feels hurtful is intended to exploit all the ways that you are present. Your alertness, your openness, and your desire to engage actually demand your presence. You're looking up, you're talking back, and as insane as it is, you're saying please.
I feel the most colored when I am thrown against a sharp white pattern.
The world is wrong. You can't put your past behind you. It's buried in you.
Where is work as release? Well-oiled doors opening and closing between intention. Restore. A pulse in the neck, the shiftiness of hands, an uncautious blink. The conversation you have with your eyes translate everything and nothing. What will be needed? What goes unfelt, unsaid? What has been duplicated, redacted here, redacted there? Altered to hide and disguise. Words encoding the body as they cover. And despite everything, the body remains. Each body is a strange beach, and you let the excess emotion you recall the Atlantic Ocean breaking on our hearts.
You land at the drugstore and it's finally your turn. And then it's not. As he walks in front of you, he puts his things on the counter.
Sir, who was next?
Oh my god, I didn't see you.
You must be in a hurry.
No, I really didn't see you.
August 29, 2005, Eric and Katrina.
Hours later, still the difficulty of what it is to be just like that. Standing there, maybe waiting, standing where the deep waters of everything backed up.
Climbing over bodies.
Stranded on a roof, trapped in a building.
And in the difficulty, nobody coming, and still someone saying, who can see it coming? The difficulty of that.
The fiction of the facts assumes innocence, ignorance, lack of intention, misdirection, the necessary conditions of a certain time and place.
Have you seen their faces?
Faith, not fear. Faith, not fear.
Where are they? Where is anyone? This is a goddamn emergency!
It's a classic binary between the rich and the poor, between the haves and the have-nots, between the whites and the blacks, and the difficulty of all that.
Then each house was a mumbling structure. All that water, buildings peeling apart, the yellow foam, the contaminated draw of mildew, mold.
The missing limbs, the bodies lodged in piles of rubble, dangling in the rafters, lying face down, arms outstretched on portable floors.
Where are the buses?
FEMA said it wasn't safe to be there.
We never reached out to anyone to tell our story because there's no ending to our story. Being honest with you, they forgot about us.
It's awful to go back home and find your own dead child.
You simply get the chills every time you see these poor individuals. So poor and so black.
Then this anesthetized distancing from dehydration, overheating, no electricity, no power, no way to communicate. We're drowning here.
Still in the difficulty.
I don't know what the water wanted.
It wanted to show you no one would come.
Did you see their faces? I am 1 in 4. Not 1 in 4 to rebel against my parents and dye my hair a crazy color, or 1 in 4 to slip and fall into a toilet and drown. I am 1 in 4 under the age of 18 to be raised without a father. I am also a woman, an African American, and a Mexican American. Basically, I am a tool, a worker, and cheap labor. These 3 things prohibit me from moving. I do not belong here. This line is close to you. You are not allowed inside. Know your place. Try next time. So what a time it is to be alive, as different sides of the world string up their signs and claim what is best for the world. Leaving people like me to our whirlwind of thoughts, not knowing if we should even try to speak up. It's hard to belong in a world that does not want you, and even harder when it convinces you you are nothing more than a statistic. Being black is I didn't mean to say it like that. I've always wanted a black friend. You're pretty for a black girl. You're taking things to heart, and you can't take a damn joke. Being human is not knowing how to decipher pain. The N-word flows from lips that have never stung with cuts through humanity. These people say the word as if they have fought all their lives just to be heard. These people say the word as if they have looked at their skin and spit on it. They say it as if they have hated themselves for being born. As a child, the silly games we played on the playground held greater meaning. I was the one always running away. Thump, 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 hide and run, hide and run. When they caught me, they shot me with their fake plastic guns and yelled, "You're dead." Cops and robbers or sharks and minnows do not fill me up with the same excitement anymore. I think of these childish games and realize I was the one that was always running. Faster and faster, too weak to keep going, but knowing if I stop, I'm done for. Faster and faster, the teenage African-American boy runs on the streets of his neighborhood. Faster and faster, I fall to the floor as the children point their fingers down at me and laugh. Faster and faster, just keep running. The boy falls to the floor, and unlike me, has a gun pointed to his head. My heart beats louder and louder in my chest as one of them kicks me in the stomach, while the boy's heart stops. Everything around me seems to be black. At a young age, I started to wonder if I bled the same. Wondering if I bleached my skin, the girls at school would finally accept me instead of shredding my self-confidence until I was nothing but a dismembered figure in a game of hangman. I once had a teacher that asked me what my family and I called each other. Were we black, colored, labeled as one of the many shades in the rainbow? Why did it have to be so complicated? The words left her small pale lips brutally choking me on the guillotine, my classmates watching as I took my last breath. Finally falling into the oblivion I had been seeking my entire life as I hang for the entertainment of others. I put on a show. I smile as I watch people tarnish my culture and claim it as theirs. I laugh when people make jokes about my ancestors who fought just to be called people. And sometimes I make the same jokes too. Falling down this web of lies, wet with tears, and I can hear myself screaming inside, "Please don't try to stop me, I'm on a roll." Maybe I should speak a little clearer, put more emphasis in my words, but even then, my words would still go unheard because in this society, my words mean nothing. I am on the wrong side of the spectrum, but on the right side of history, yet it could take years until I stop being an accident bleeding out on the concrete. My little sister doesn't like to wear her hair down. Since the kids at school say it's nappy and rough, so she wears it up, decorates it with a bow or two, and changes herself to reach their view. She cries in the shopping cart at Walmart because she says she doesn't feel pretty. I console her and tell her what she needs to hear, and I wonder if she could tell that my voice is shaking, that I just could not come up with the correct words, with the correct punctuations, that my tongue feels heavy with lies as I watch history unfold itself in front of me. I empty myself in front of her, searching through the clutter for a band-aid to heal the wounds deeper than flesh. The same wounds that have left scars on my self-carved insecurities and false prodigies that have made me unrecognizable when I look in the mirror. Oh my God! Nothing has changed. So how can I say that things get better, that it won't hurt so much in the morning? Ignore them. You matter. I love you, I tell her, but in my head I pray to God to help her. The loneliness that was created inside me claws up to my chest, creeping towards my lips. There is no pain. When it comes to loneliness, there is only emptiness. Not belonging in a world you thought was yours is the worst punishment. It's carrying a key that opens no doors. You're trapped within the realms of discrimination and bigotry until you discover words are the best therapy. You're going to be okay. I tell her. I wonder if I'll ever be the way I was made.
February 26, 2012, in memory of Trayvon Martin.
My brothers are notorious. They have not been in prison.
They have been in prison.
The prison is not a place you enter. It is no place.
My brothers are notorious.
They do regular things like wait. On my birthday, they say my name.
Trayvon, Trayvon, Trayvon.
They will never forget that we are named. What is that memory?
The days of our childhood together were steep steps into a collapsing mind. It looked like we rescued ourselves. We're rescued. Then there are these days, each day of our adult lives, they will never forget our way through.
These brothers, each brother, my brother, my dearest brother, dear heart.
Your hearts are broken. This is not a secret, though. There are secrets, and as yet I do not understand how my own sorrow has turned into.
My brother's hearts, which are broken. If I knew another way to be, I would call up a brother. I would hear myself saying, my brother. I would hear myself saying, my brother, my dearest brother, dear heart.
On the tip of a tongue, one note following another is another path, another dawn, where the pink sky is bloodshot of struck, of sleepless, of sorry, of senseless, shush, those years of and before me and
my brothers.
The years of passage, plantation, migration, of Jim Crow segregation, of poverty, inner city profiling, of 1 and 3, 2 jobs.
Hey, boy!
Each a felony, accumulate into the hours inside, our lives where we all are caught hanging.
The rope inside us, the tree inside us, its roots, our limbs, a throat sliced through, and when we open our mouth to speak.
Blossoms, oh blossoms, no place coming out. Brother, dear brother, that kind of blue. The sky is the silence of brothers all the days leading up to my call.
If I called, I say goodbye. Before I wrote the goodbye, I say
Goodbye.
Before anyone can hang up, don't hang up.
My brother?
Hangs up, though he is there. I keep talking and that keeps him there. The sky is blue, kind of blue. The day is hot. Is it cold? Are you cold? It does get cool. Is it cool? Are you cool?
My brother?
It's completed by sky. The sky is his silence. Eventually he says, it's raining, raining down. He won't hang up. He's there, but he's hung up there. Is it there? Goodbye.
I break the goodbye. I say goodbye before anyone can hang up.
Don't hang up. Wait with me, though the waiting might be the call of goodbyes.
Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye.
I knew whatever was happening in front of me was happening, and then the police vehicle came to a screeching halt in front of me like they were setting up a blockade.
Get on the ground now.
And you are not the guy, and still you fit the description, because there's only one guy who's always fitting the description. In a landscape drawn from an ocean bed, you can't drive yourself sane. So angry you're crying, emotion wears a guy out. Our emotion is wearing you out, and still you are not that guy.
I must have been speeding.
No, you weren't speeding.
Then why are you pulling me over?
Put your hands in the air.
And then you were stretched out on the hood, handcuffed, and pushed into the vehicle's backseat. The officer's knees pressing into your collarbone. The officer's warm breath vacating the face creasing to its own secret smile. You know this is wrong. You need to be quiet. Why are you talking if you haven't done anything wrong? And you are not the guy, and still you fit the description, because there's only one guy who's always fitting the description.
Don't pull it out. Don't pull it out.
Cypress devastation.
Do you see it? The invisible boundary between everything between you and I, wrapped in years of tension. Some will choose to ignore it, climbing over this sightless rope without any strain to the physical being, and others will try to rip the boundaries to shred, hands soaked in the blood of its victims. The worst type are those who will only ignore the separation when it suits them, forgetting about this devastation. Someone like you, taking and claiming are the only two things you know, what you were taught and told, set out into a specific code that others could never fathom to uncover. One of entitlement and privilege, the master of all the switches, but you still don't see it. You were spelling my name wrong and getting mad when I corrected, as if I'm trying to change the name you gave me. Like you finally gave me a purpose, a new life. I guess that's what the white man thought in the beginning. You are stealing my name and adding an E, deleting the apostrophe, claiming it as yours and leaving me to count the score, adding an extra bolt on the door. Not because I am angry, but because I feel that if I allow myself to trust you, you will take everything until I have nothing left, feasting, and when you're no longer hungry. It is not your fault. You were taught that this world holds no walls, only the ones you build yourself. So let's not talk like we're mutual friends, when really you are the Pink Panther trying to steal my diamonds, romanticizing the idea of stealing and spoon-feeding it to children, the same kids that will grow up thinking cruelty doesn't exist. Not seeing that the detective tries in every episode to explain the crime and is blamed for it, laughed at for being so sensitive, labeled a liar in every scene until he gives up and takes it, sits back and watches. I just wanted to try something new, you say, when really you wanted to know the secrets to my every concoction, trying to figure out a way to my magic, the ingredients in my every potion, slipping you just a taste of the real thing through my vulnerability. multiplying it and selling it to your girlfriends and receiving all the credit, coming up with a new name for it, and erasing the creator from existence. But coming back to me when it no longer sells, no longer gets the woes and the gullible gals, asking for something new, something that will suit you more, something that is actually yours. Do you see it now?
Some years, there exists a wanting to escape. You, floating above your certain ache. Still the ache coexists, caught at the end of
You are you, even before you grow into understanding you, are not anyone, worthless, not worth you. Even as your own weight insists, you are here, fighting off the weight of non-existence.
And still this life parts your lids, you see. You're seeing your extending hand as a falling wave. I, they, he, she, we, you, turn. Only to discover, the encounter, to be alien to this place. Wait.
The patience is in the living. Times open out to you. The opening between you and you, occupied. Zone for an encounter. Given the histories of you, and always, who is this you?
The start of you. Each day, a presence already. Hey you, slipping down, burning the you buried within. You are everywhere, and you are nowhere in the game. The outside comes in, then you. Hey you.
Overheard in the moonlight, overcome in the moonlight.
Soon you are sitting around publicly listening when you hear this. What happens to you doesn't belong to you, only half concerns you. You're pulled back into the body of you, receiving the nothing gaze.
The world out there insisting on this only half concerns you. It's now yours, and still a world begins its furious erasure. Who do you think you are? Saying I to me? You nothing, you nobody, you.
A body in the world drowns in it. Hey you, all our favorite history won't instill, incite, won't turn a body conscious, won't make the look and the eyes say yes. Though there is nothing to solve even as each moment is an answer.
Don't say I if it means so little. Holds the little forming no one. You are not sick, you are injured. You ache for the rest of life. How to care for the injured body, the kind of body that can hold the content it is living. And where is the safest place when the place must be someplace other than in the body?
Even now your voice entangles this mouth. White words are here as pulls, strumming. Shut out, shut in, shut up. You cannot say, a body translates it to you. You there, hey you, even as it loses the location of its mouth.
When you lay your body in the body, entered as if skin and bone were public places. When you lay your body in the body, entered as if you're the ground you walk on. You know no memory should live. And these memories becoming the body of you.
You slow all existence. Down with your cough, detectable only as sky. The night's yawn absorbs you as you lie down on the wrong angle, to the sun nearly already to let go of your hand.
Wait for me. Though the waiting, wait up, might take until nothing whatsoever was done. To be left alone, the only wish, to call you out.
Who shouted you? You shouted you. In the murmur of the air, you sometimes sounding like you sometimes saying you. Go nowhere. Be no one but you first. Nobody notices, only you've known. You're not sick, not crazy, not angry, not sad. It's just this, you're injured.
Everything shaded, everything darkened, everything shadowed. Is the strip, is the stroke. Is the trace, is the aftertaste. I, they, he, she, we, you were too concluded yesterday to know whatever was done could also be done, was also done, was never done.
The worst injury is feeling
you don't belong so much
To you. A friend writes of the numbing effect of humming and its return you to your own side. It's no longer audible. You've gone into it. Some call it aging, an internalized liquid, smoke blurring ordinary ache.
Just this morning another. What did he say? Come on, get back in the car. Your partner wants to face off with the mouth, and who knows what handheld objects the other vehicle carries.
Trayvon Martin's name sounds from the car radio a dozen times each half hour. You pull your love back into the seat because though no one seems to be chasing you, the justice system has other plans. Yes, and this is how.
You are a citizen.
Come on.
Let it go.
Move on.
guys want to ask some questions after they go through their names, you're more than welcome to. So we'll start on this side.
My name is Timothy Stewart. I am a senior at Alice High School.
My name is Eric Gonzalez. I'm also a senior at Alice High School.
My name is Natalie Cruz, and I am also a senior at Adkins High School.
I'm Victoria Cabrera, and I'm a senior at Elsa High School. I'm Kenya Burton, and I'm a senior at Everett Howard.
Before they walk off, I'll open the stage to the audience for any questions, any comments, any feedback for my actors.
I have a question. What was the most difficult scene for you? Collectively or individually?
Individually, the scene where the police brutality took place. Me personally, I've been in a situation like that. I've had 2 assault rifles aimed at me, and my brother and my girlfriend's brother and her uncle on the way to go visit her at her college. They mistaked me for someone they were going after because of my dreads. So they pulled us over, and like with everything that's going on, my girlfriend's uncle was already infuriated with the police, so he just was not being cooperative, because everything that's going on. And so she took that into action, and she was like, she called back up, and next thing you know, I looked to my right, my hands up, hands up like this in the back seat, seatbelt on, everything, like not trying to die. Like the whole time I was like, I'm gonna die today. I'm gonna die today. And then next thing I looked to my right, assault rifle aimed right in my head. I'm 17 years old, not doing nothing. I'm gonna die. That's what I think. I'm gonna die. And that scene right there is just it's crazy. People are dying over mistakes. Oh, I thought you were this. Oh, you're black. I'm gonna kill you. Like, what is that? What is that? I did this to show people. Like, that has to stop. That has to stop. This shirt, it represents this. And this isn't just for black people. It's for everyone. It's for everyone. This isn't just me, oh, I hate police, or I hate white people. This is to let you guys know that that has to stop. It has to stop.
Did you actors, did you have any choice in what roles you wanted to play or sections, or was the director, or how was that?
We numbered them actor 1 through 4. But I think Roddy had a big part in assigning what actors represented what, because I did see a pattern between actors.
Okay.
So after reading what Roddy gave me, I decided to try this out, try that out, and then eventually it fit.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and it actually played very well with
I think so.
actors.
I really liked the book, but I wanted to simplify it because I heard too many people going, it's kind of difficult, or, so I wanted to simplify it and get it. And that's why it isn't the whole book, it's just these special scenes. And like anything in the creative process, you take a chance and you let it go. And Veronica, who's an outstanding person and a director, took it. She didn't have to. She has classes to teach. She has a play that she's putting on, but she took this on her own time. And I didn't realize all the actors had never been on the stage before.
Well, some of them.
Oh, some of them?
Not all of them.
Yeah. And it was just amazing to see the development when they got it. So sometimes you just kind of throw things to somebody, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. My personal feeling, this amazed me, because I saw like the first rehearsal, and and then I look here, and these guys, you got it. That was an amazing performance. The only thing that's in my head is, we got to get a bunch of people to see this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be just limited to here. I mean, these guys did a lot of good work, and they got the idea, and they got it down. So, you are amazing, and you're wonderful, and I'd like to get another gig for you.
Mike, I was one that stumbled a bit trying to get through the book. and stumbled several times. And I think you did pull the essence of the book, and I was able to really, really see the message. All of you did a really fine job. Thank you. Thank you very much for delivering the message.
Can you really want to share the experience with this?
Which is pretty cool because what ended up happening is I'm the only one from Everett. And then so I had written a poem for the Citizen Poetry Competition, and all these poems that I read like are mine. So I've like written them and I revised them. So I've always like, and they had me like create new ones for them. And so it's always been like a topic that I have had to deal with, and the fact that like I'm half Mexican. And so it's like the fact that I'm like in a country now, I'm seeing multiple sides. And I'm seeing the fact that I'm a woman and that our president just doesn't see value, and then that I'm Mexican. And then so these like, I would always get comments, they're just like, oh, and he's like, are you gonna get deported? Where are you going, Africa or Mexico? And then so I would get that on the daily, and then I had to grow up with that, and then being bullied, and then I'm like, why can't you leave me alone? They're just like, because you weren't meant to be born. And so it's kind of just like, I had to learn that it wasn't just these kids, it was where they came from. And it was that their parents had those ideas, and that when they came to school, they saw me as this target. And then so my mom and my sisters, they've always like pushed me to do everything that I need to talk about, because this is a very important message. And I feel like a lot of adults are like, oh, you know what, you're in high school, you haven't tasted it yet, like it's not as bad as you say, but it is bad. And it's tough, and it's hard to live in a world where where you don't belong. So I like wrote these pieces, and I was kind of just like, this is just like the amazing opportunity to do, because I kind of get my voice out and tell people that it isn't just me, but my family and my little sister, who kids at school don't say like, oh, why is your hair like that? And he's like, do you comb your hair? And then like anyone that has curly hair know, yeah, I comb through my hair. And I was like, it just gets big, you know? so I really like talking about that, and I would read it to my sister, and she's kind of just like, oh, like she knows she's in it, so she's like, oh my god, like, she's all excited. Yeah.
If any of you don't belong, then life itself does not belong on this planet. Period. Period.
Thank you.
That's all it is.
And Timothy, I recommend you write up your story. You could easily go in this. It's a real powerful piece you got there.
Really.
Anybody else?
I haven't spoken.
Let's hear from you guys.
Experience.
Like personally, my favorite part was when we were introduced to Kenya. Like we don't know her like through school or anything, but she came to our after-school practices, and like the first time we heard her poem, like we all got chills. Like everyone was just like mind blown by like her artistic ability, and like being able to like introduce so many different topics in like in one piece. And it was kind of like extremely inspiring, and I feel like it really brought this whole play together. Like every single one of her poems, and like made everything like 10 times better. I start crying.
Like, you know she's live. I mean, it's gonna be like, we're like, oh.
He was all jumpy, and like when he first heard it, he started like jumping. He was like, yes! Like, we got into it. They're like, yes!
There's a difference between like hearing things and actually feeling it. Like I felt this play. I felt her poem. I felt it.
For me, it was, the play kind of connected to me on a personal level. Not so much that I had a very, I would say, terrible experience with a cop, but just being pulled over with having a cart that you just purchased. I'm gonna tell you my story. So me and my dad were driving from New Mexico over here to Salinas. We just purchased a car from one of his friends, and we got pulled over not even 20 minutes in the highway on the way over here. All of a sudden, the cop, disrespectful, started screaming at my dad. My dad can speak English, but not as well as, I guess, without an accent or a perfect English. The cop straight disrespected him. I tried to speak up for him. I tried to tell him, I tried to talk to him. The cop would just be unreasonable. He took me out. He put handcuffs on me, pushed me against the car. He just told me to shut up. My dad was very moved by that, and in the end, we had no problem with the cop because, I mean, we weren't doing anything wrong. We had just bought a car. He checked our license, he checked our plates, he checked everything. We were there for a very long time. It was all just very scary for me.
What was the transition from handcuffs to, I mean, did you talk him down, or how did that change? I mean, what made that change?
All I did was speak up because my dad was trying to explain to him, but I was also trying to talk in place of my dad. And at the end, he just told us to get out of the car, basically, because he thought we had stolen.
Oh, okay, gotcha. And so you convinced him finally that you hadn't stolen it, that you just bought it?
He actually went to go check that on his own. He didn't really believe us. Wasn't really talking much.
Oh. Thank you.
My experience, I didn't really, I don't know. I was in my English class and my teacher said something about reading some lines for a book, and I just raised my hand and I signed up, and I didn't expect to get so much out of it. I've never been in a play before or anything like that, so it's my first time, but I got so much stuff out of this, and like, I talked to new people, so I already knew, but I got to meet someone new, and I don't know, I guess I have had some very different police encounters, but in my case, I only live with my mom right now, and it's pretty hard. And there was a point where, I don't know, it's hard. I haven't had my dad for a year, and it's pretty sad. Because I wake up every day, and I see my brothers, and like, I have had my dad for a long time, and my brothers are still small. And there was a day where my brothers asked me, they asked my mom, where was my dad? And my mom had to tell them, he's off working. That's not the truth. He's in jail right now. And people make mistakes. And it was one day, I was at school last year, about time of year. And it was going great. I had testing for school for this year. Well, it was going to count out towards college. And I got pulled out of class. There was a detective waiting for me, and I went and I talked to him and everything. And afterward, I had an appointment that day. I had actually court to go to. And they wouldn't let me go. I called my mom, and I told her I was stuck. She was already there picking me up. And when she tried to go in, the guy just pulled my mom out, and she's like, you can't talk to your daughter right now because we feel like if you're telling her to lie to us. And it was pretty sad because my mom was crying and she was mad, and when my mom gets mad, she gets really, really pissed. And she doesn't start, my mom's a really calm person, but like if you really mess around with her kids, she's gonna do anything to protect us. And sometimes they don't understand that some of our parents are willing to give everything just to see their kids happy. And when I saw that cop saying that, pushing my mom away, it got me really mad. And the matter of fact that they wouldn't listen to my mom, and like they wouldn't let me go. And that day they pulled out a search warrant on my house just because my house had a past in drugs, because their owners before used to be they used to deal with drugs, and it had that history. And they told my mom, and they gave her a search warrant, and we think your husband is dealing drugs. And my mom just said, well, that's very stupid from your part, because my husband is like very clean. You can do any test on him. He's drug free and everything. And they didn't believe us. And when they asked my mom, I was still at school, and it was, I don't know. I mean, why at school? Come on. They just took my mom's phone and they took my phone because apparently we were hiding stuff. And when we got out of school, they followed my mom and they told her to give them the keys because they wanted to search the house. But my mom had her car keys with them, so she couldn't give them the keys. And she just went to the house and she waited outside, and there was already cops at home, obviously. And she had to give the keys, and they couldn't even open the door. It was pretty sad because they opened the door and everything, and even after we told them that there was nobody in the house, they still pulled out their weapons, and like my little brothers were right there. And like, what do my brothers know about weapons? It's like, yeah, they've seen them in the movies, but I mean, come on. And like, it's sad because kids are being exposed to weapons and everything without even knowing, and like sometimes they're seeing people that they really love just be taken away. And like sometimes, yeah, they get shot in front, they get people die in front of little kids, and like adults have to come up with some random stuff just so that they don't think that, you know, something bad happened to them. Like usually they tell them, oh, they went off to work, or oh, they just went to a happy place. And like little kids don't know that, and when they eventually find out the truth, it's like, it's really sad.
Sorry.
And mass incarceration.
I want to end with a note that prior to this, I didn't know any of the students. I was introduced to them by the current teachers, and these stories, these conversations came about as we went through this stage meeting, which is wonderful because, you know, we all get to connect on a certain level where you are taking part of this type of theater, and at the same time you are relating it back to yourself. So it helps you so much more. And somehow, some way, fate, you know, ended up choosing these actors to be up here, and they had these experiences, and that's helped propel this work forward. So, yeah. So I'd like to thank you guys for once again coming here and listening to our stories and listening to our voices and listening to the youth, which is an important part of this community. So,
Thank you so much.